Welcome to Reporter Findings, the podcast where we dive deep into the world of health, unravel the latest trends, and bring you real stories from patient cases. Join us, Dr. Trevor Eason and Dr. BAUMGARN, as we explore everything from innovative health practices and insights from local health business leaders to cutting-edge discoveries and the science-backed methods shaping modern medicine. Am I good? We good?
Welcome to Reporter Findings, podcast number 2. Big week this week, Doc.
Super big week.
Election happening, lots of super cool things in the office. First thing I have to say, though, I think that our wives, if you're watching on YouTube, definitely saw what we were looking like last week and said that can't happen again.
No kidding. Last week was a little rough. That was a bit of a mock cast, and it turned out to be pretty okay.
It's all right.
It was good, so we enjoyed it. But yeah, like you said, it was a busy week this week. We saw a lot of patients, did a lot of cool things with them. Election week. President-elect Donald Trump in the future, lots of big things. We're going to be talking about a bunch of different things, not too political, but since we are in the health space, we'll be talking a little bit about some of the changes that are going to be coming, what to be prepared for, what your guys' thoughts are, what our thoughts are about it, and everything else. So, yeah, I think we should potentially jump in. So, in and of itself, I want to read this real quick. One, excited about what's going on, but 2, there's a lot of controversy happening with the RFK thing.
There is. Both of us in the holistic mindset, pretty excited about that, pretty pumped with what he brings to the table and his stance on it, but go ahead.
Absolutely. Well, it just says right here, so President-elect Donald Trump has nominated Robert F. Kennedy Jr., a known vaccine skeptic, to lead the Department of Health and Human Services. Kennedy plans to overhaul the U.S. public health system, aiming for the removal of corporate influence and to revisit vaccine approval process. His nomination has sparked controversy and concerns about his stance on vaccines and the potential policy shifts. Well, that's one view of things, but we'll kind of jump into what we're feeling about some of that stuff too.
100%.
So what do you think?
Well, I guess my first question is, why is that controversial? When you are tightening down on what's approved and what's not approved and just kind of taking away from corporate, if you will, and what has been the status quo, what makes that bad in perspectives? I mean, you can get into it, but whenever you have checks and balances, that's obviously the way the U.S. government has been set up, and one branch of the government balancing out another and just making sure that there's no monopoly, which there kind of tends to be within this category. And now he's tightening down on, because we all know vaccines have increased, for better or worse. We can speak into that over the last X amount of years. And so for him to tighten down on why that's approved, when that's approved, when that's administered, I think is a great thing.
Absolutely. And I mean, I totally agree. I think that there needs to be a check and balance system. And I think over time, and you're going to find too, the amount of money that has been flooded into the election process in and of a whole on the Democratic side, which is mostly big pharma, big food, other things that are pushing that agenda. I think you're going to find that most people currently that were on that side, or even people in the medical field that are just we can't have a vaccine skeptic in here. We can't, because what I've been reading is that people are heavily concerned about his position and his nomination in that position as the Department Head of the Human and Health Services, which goes over the CDC, the FDA, all these different things. And I think their big concern is, in and of itself, yes, he's a lawyer, but he's also a politician. In and of itself, I think there's just he doesn't have any medical background. You don't need those things, But I think that the worry comes from his stances and what he's publicly proclaimed moving forward. But for us, those things are necessary. In and of itself, your video you made the other day about dyes and foods and stuff like that, and cereals and other additives and stuff that are just really destroying the health of America. Those things definitely need to be addressed, and those things need to have checks and balances. And I think that a lot of good will come from this, specifically just with the approval process. I think I saw a post the other day of him saying oh gosh, I'm going to butcher it, so I'm not going to say it, but being an anti-vaxxer. I don't even think he's an anti-vaxxer. I think he just wants better approval processing and as well as accountability to these companies. We already know how vaccine injuries occur. We know that list is not public knowledge. It's not whatever, and payouts are in the billions of dollars for vaccine injured people. Now, it's not to say that vaccines haven't saved people. We know that research can validate some things, but at what at what cost?
Exactly.
Right? Like, I mean, we're talking about when I was a kid, I think I got like maybe 10 or 12 vaccines. Now the list is like,
it's like 55, I think.
yeah. And it's insane. And now we're wondering like why certain things are happening, why those things are there. And we can talk about epigenetics and genetics and autoimmunity and how those things play into vaccines and how it can increase the risk for certain neurodevelopmental things. And I'm not going to sit on here and say that there's a high correlation, because there really is no solidified evidence, but you can definitely make correlation to certain things specific to vaccines increasing the risk for neurodevelopmental delay. But there's also things that need to be in place. And there's plenty of people, plenty of my patients, that their kids have autism altogether and they never got a vaccine ever.
Right.
So it's just one of those things where like I'm personally not going to sit on here and say that vaccines or whatever, but they definitely need to have some more accountability, way more rigor, and there needs to be more knowledge placed upon the provider to be able to answer hard questions from patients. And I would sit there and tell the entire audience currently, like, if you need to go into each appointment in your well checks with your provider or whoever's taking care of your child and ask them questions. And if they can't answer those questions about what's in the vaccine, how does it affect the brain, how does it affect the gut, what signs and symptoms should I be worried about, versus just these global sweeping, like, no, we don't need to know anything about that. If you even question any of this, you're an anti-vax. That's not true at all. Knowledge base is everything, and you should always question everything. I'm happy when my patients question me because it keeps me sharp.
Same.
But, it's just one of those things. What do you think?
Man, there's so many directions I want to take with that. And there's a lot of stories that have been passed down about infants being vaccinated without the parents' approval, and it's just done, and they're like, wait, what the heck? You get to ask any questions on it, so very open and honest on it. I think that we are cleaning up, if you will, post-vax things that have happened down the line, and again, that's why it needs to be regulated and cracked down on. The other thing I would say is, if it's not broke, don't fix it, but the opposite is true, right? And I think a lot of eyes were opened in 2020 with COVID, and people are a lot of questions are being asked more in the holistic space. Like, why is this happening? Why is this COVID vaccine being mandated in so many places without research and without all the experiments being done before it's this forced mandate? And that kind of raised some eyebrows, and that's why I think that RFK stepping in that position is really good, in order to just break down why is this happening, then being able to provide a solution and answer to so many people, because at least it's gone through the rigors of being tested, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that like there really needs to be those things just need to be in place. And for me, I'm very happy that RFK is coming in. I'm really, I would say I have bias for sure. I definitely have bias, but I would also say that like I'm really looking forward to not only his successes but his failures, because I know he's a guy that can come in there and accept that. I know he can accept the challenge. I know that he can fail and be okay with that failure and grow from it. And just like anybody, nobody's going to be perfect. Nobody's going to come in and do all the right things, but I really look forward to seeing like how he handles not only the vaccine thing but food, and all the things he said. So like I'll name off a few, and we can kind of like go by them or go in order of them. So first one we've kind of talked about, which we can extrapolate a little bit further. And to your point, the COVID vaccine thing, I think that I think there was mass chaos in COVID. Everybody knows that.
There's panic.
There's major panic. This was a time to solidify something. We had to come up as a solution. We are the United States of America, and we had to do something. We had to lead the way, just like we always do. And I think that even if you say the science was there 20 years before, and public safety and then specific testing, and there needs to be a 20-year window anyways, they just put all this stuff in place. And to be honest, it's a virus. I mean, like even the flu virus, or the flu vaccine, year over year after year after trend, like the best it's ever been, I think, is like 57%. Like effectiveness is there. Now I understand with the elderly and immunocompromised patients and so on, but like at what end are we just like, viruses are virulent, they're not alive, you can't kill them, you have to deprogram them, and you can't just give everybody antivirals.
Correct.
So in and of itself, like there's always a short window. You have 48 hours if you're going to give somebody Paxlovid, or not Paxlovid, but other any type of antiviral, right? Like, and if you don't hit that, like Tamiflu, but if you don't hit that window, like it's worthless. And it's just one of those things where we should talk about antibiotic stewardship as well in this podcast.
Yeah, dude, absolutely.
But with that, you know, we just need to really address our future when we start to think about what we're going to implement in people's minds with medication, vaccines, and so on. Because I think we massively dropped the ball. The American public saw that we massively dropped the ball, not only with masking, or not only with the vaccine, but also with masking. I mean, the problem with having something so new, like an mRNA vaccine or the COVID vaccine or the different types, nobody thought you're going to get a clot from Johnson & Johnson. Nobody thought that you were going to have some increased risk just having COVID. I mean, like, those things can be documented either way. With spike protein causing clot, you don't have to have the vaccine to have it, but it increased the risk. That's why they pulled it off the market. And in and of itself, I think that we just didn't have enough data. And all we're asking, and all RFK is trying to do, is boost that approval process to make sure that there are checks and balances in that realm. But, you know, so let's get to the food, processed food and school nutrition stuff. Yeah. So Kennedy's calling for banning hundreds of food additives, chemicals. He's called for getting ultra processed foods out of school lunches and so on. So what do you think?
Dyes in and of themselves have zero benefit to the human gut, right? I mean, it's just synthetic dyes that are made, and there's even been ties, especially with yellow 5 and red 40, to hyperactivity in kids. Now, those are things that we treat here in the office. But if there's no added benefit on the one end, and on the other far end, it's actually causing detriment to the kid, why is it even an option to be in our foods? And, you know, we talked about soil depletion and all those things in different videos, but at the end of the day, this is the future of America. And if we're pumping them full of garbage and things that are not benefiting their growth and development, then I'm 100% for getting rid of them.
100%. You know, I think... one of the biggest things that I see in my patients, well, what are those dyes and colors for? To make food look awesome. You think about Fruity Pebbles. I mean, like, everybody wants to eat cereal that looks like the rainbow. Everybody, like, when you're a kid, what kind of ice cream do you think about? Superman ice cream.
100%.
Like, there is a reason why that is there. And I just don't think it's necessary. I mean, like... you know, in and of itself, we've talked about all these things and soil depletion of nutrients and all the above, but I would say, like, definitively, like, there's no rhyme or reason, not to mention the effect, in which we'll get to a little bit later with neurofeedback, but the effect of the hyperactivity that will happen with these dyes.
Correct.
I mean, like, let's just use, for instance, like my daughter. There's plenty of times where I've given her Tylenol, and I've made this mistake of giving her just general Tylenol without dye-free Tylenol, and, like, literally, she loses her mind. Same thing is true with Benadryl. I mean, there's also effect. There's a different reason why that can occur. But for her, she loses her mind anytime. So, like, we did it twice, and we realized, okay, this is stupid. We're looking at the label, and this got red 40 in it. And it's not to mention other additives that are labeled as, you know, they're passing the label check of saying it's not glutamate-containing foods, but it is. And those things can be extremely hyper reactive to the brain. It's a neurochemical. So, you know, we know those things are there. And, like, the public is just like, why are our kids... worse? Why do our kids have ADHD? Why are scholastic studies going down? Why are testing in America going down? Why are we seeing such an upheaval in ADHD diagnosis, OCD diagnosis, and all these different things? Well, maybe we should look at the food first. 100%. You know, so, you know, I don't really know, but I think there definitely needs to be the upheaval, and I'm excited about that portion of what he plans to do.
We don't put garbage fuel into a Ferrari and expect it to perform the way it needs to.
100%.
You can't do the same thing to the human body and expect. I mean, the Lord created different macronutrients and micronutrients and constructed food the way he did for a reason. To add something synthetic, anti-natural is just going to have a detrimental effect.
Absolutely. And you can see it. I mean, you can see it all over the place. But
speaking of hyperactivity, though, can you talk a little bit about some of what you do in terms of, like, brain bit, and say somebody comes in diagnosed with ADHD, maybe elsewhere, maybe here. What is your first line of direction that you direct the parents towards, and then how do you take on their care?
For sure. I mean, I think that one, we always want to run like a QEEG on their kid's brain, and we'll see kind of where they're at, which we'll look at the brain map. I'll analyze the data, see what waves are functioning at what part of the test and so on. And then we can derive a specific protocol for that. Now, we like using BrainBit because it's effective for kids. It's effective for young kids. And it works almost as a neurofeedback, but also a biofeedback in and of itself.
It's EEG, correct?
Yeah, correct. So like in and of itself, we do plan on expanding some of those things into like a lens or even brain master and some of these other things to get bigger effects. I just don't think that we do have more of a population in psychiatric med now. And I would say that we are probably needing that more, but for the kids, it just works well because, like, let's just say this, BrainBit, if we put that on their head after they do their QEEG map and then we see what parts of their brain's functioning or not functioning the way that they should, they can actually look at a screen and control a submarine underwater with their mind. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's kind of telepathic in the sense, but it's not. It's just measuring the microcurrent of the specific waves, alpha, delta, beta, whatever, and going through gamma and seeing different wavelengths and hitting different lobes of the brain, right? And that's the most beautiful part because you can tell when the patient or the kiddo's attention span is nothing, right? They get the plane, like if they're flying a plane this time, they get the plane up in the air and all of a sudden they like lose track. Boom, done. Plane crashes. It's immediate visual and auditory feedback to let them know like, hey, so when we have some of the neurotherapists that come in and work with them, we're like, hey, like we're getting the auditory processing, like pick it back up, focus again, and get them back on train. And eventually, by the time they go through like their neuro boot camp per se, like they're able to fly the plane the whole time. Mm-hmm. They're able to keep the submarine this way. But it's not only that; they can actually control the up and down motion, and they can swerve fish or underground or underwater mines or things like that, where now they're actually using their brain to control something on a screen. It's quite remarkable. Now, as we start to go more into, neuropsychiatric medicine. So yes, I mean, can I prescribe neuropsychiatric medicine? Yes. Can we do different things such as drips like ketamine and stuff? Yes, we can do those things. I don't preferably like to do that that often, but I do like the non-invasive approach of things like lens or like brain master that can give the patient a visual feedback on a screen, measure the waves themselves, and then derive an output and then re-challenge their brain through different types of microcurrent. And I think that, the research is robust. The research has always been robust in this field, and I think it's so new, but you're going to find that like these types of therapeutics are extremely beneficial, not only if you're doing medicine, or not only if you're doing nutrition and lifestyle stuff, but it is such a beneficial ancillary therapy that you can add or in solo that can rapidly change somebody's outlook on what's going on,
You've got the instantaneous feedback when you're actually playing the game, or whatever you want to call it. But physically, it's very palpable to me when they come in versus when they leave. The attention span, they're dialed in, whether it's a listening perspective to parents or what have you, or anything else, they just carry it with. And then the next time they come in, it's almost like they're met at that same spot and just continue to improve. Absolutely. Objectively, the data's there. You've got those score points that you can compare, which is great. It makes it fun and interactive for the kids because if it works, but the kid doesn't want to do it, then what's the point? But at the same time, they love the game, and physically, you can see it in just a couple of visits.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, best. I mean, like I don't always get to work with the kids unless it's like the initial visit, but now you've been working with some of them, seeing what they're doing. And it is beneficial to see like what a kid's brain and body can do when they thrive. And a good point of reference is this to tie it back to why nutrition and why like fixing somebody's gut if it's got an infection, a kid's gut, why it's got an infection. Now, we had this discussion the other day of like, well, why would you do this or blah, blah. And I told you that I used to just do just the neuro rehab or just the inclusion of which, and they'd get better, but in 3 months they'd be trash bucket again. Like they'd have all the behavior, and I'm just like, this doesn't make sense. So as soon as we started implementing metabolic systems, as soon as we started fixing their diet, removing things from their diet, dyes, sugars, things that are inflammatory to them, and also making, inflammation from like such as infections, massive change.
Unbelievable.
But like a longevity change too. And, we're going to post a video here coming up of like more like a documentary of my niece who I treated, who is like, I really can't wait for this because like it's uber emotional. It's great because like you can really see how her life was completely rectified from something that nobody knew she had going on.
Mm-hmm.
And this is no pat on the back for me. Like I didn't start anything other than just being aware and seeing certain things. But I would say that like nobody was going to make that change. The answers they got in that moment were she's just thin and gangly and this is how she is. And some kids are just more emotional than others. And sometimes they have headaches and they just need to take naps. And sometimes they need 12 hours of sleep. And it's just like, I don't buy it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't buy it. I see hundreds of kids. I see thousands of adults. Like I don't buy it. And I'm glad that I didn't. And I'm glad that she's my niece. And I'm glad that she fought through it. I mean, like, I really can't wait for the story because, like, she's going to get into it of how she would literally take her pills. She was good with, like, the medicine stuff. So we had to put her on an antibiotic and certain things because she had C. diff and other things like that. But when it came to some of the supplementation, some of the antimicrobials that aren't really fun to take but are also necessary to reestablish her gut flora, she was taking them and she was just like either flush them down the toilet or throw them in the trash. And she was sneaking candy and all this other stuff. Why? Because what she had to go through was difficult. It's difficult for an adult and it's extremely difficult for a child. Now, obviously we maintained her nutrition because we're looking at development and growth and those things, but it's still difficult. But it's a beautiful story and a testament to show like if you do the right things with kids, if you treat their guts, if you treat their symptoms, if you treat them and don't just say, this is what it is, then you're going to get the results. And the neuro-based therapies like lens or neurofeedback or some of the other things we do here and what you do are just going to revolutionize these kids and parents' life. So,
and the brain-gut connection, like you had said, is so visible. I mean, when you added that next step of tying in the functional medicine standpoint with specifically one patient I'm thinking of, like almost instantaneously, but you could see as soon as that inflammatory marker was removed, he was back in action. And obviously that's transferable to adults too. And think of that in a large scale, getting back to what we were talking about originally with the different dyes. We kind of get out of that mindset when we're kids, like we want to protect our kids, but it's okay for adults, like here and there, but it's really not. I mean, it's affecting attention, focus, different things that are affecting your life and then also your job performance.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, I mean, it really is simply that. Like, I think a lot of people, and like I had this other guy come in the other day and, you know, came to the front desk and they asked him like, hey, how you doing? Like they normally would. And he's just like, I'm doing absolutely amazing. And they were taken back and they were like, is he being like facetious? Is he like being sarcastic? And he's like, no, like I have never felt this good in my life. And he's like, I don't know, maybe 60. And just the vibrancy in this guy's life, man. I mean, like, and we've done different physiological and biological age markers, and like he has decreased in his age, meaning like, let's just say he's 60. I'm not going to give any demographics, but functioning wise, he was like 10 years younger on that testing. And it's just incredible to see that somebody, and his words were this, I didn't know I had a problem. I thought it was just general aging. And he, like, the best part that he told me the other day was, I'm coming out of the grocery store and I'm walking across the parking lot. And in that moment, I realized, like, how much more difficult it was for me to walk across the parking lot when I left the grocery store and how much easier it is now. And it's not like it was like, I'm decrepit and I can't walk, but like he notices all these benefits and he's really never felt better. And it really goes to show, like, I think, and I know based on the patients that I and you see, they have no idea how bad they are. No idea. And nobody knows how bad they feel until they start feeling good. And that's really where, you know, we step in.
And I think that's one of the things that lights a fire underneath both of us is sayings like, it's just normal aging. It is what it is.
Yeah.
But let's just do a deep dive. Let us look because everybody knows that 100% of people are going to die. But the quality of life living out those years can be amazing and so much more than what most people experience.
Absolutely. So let's jump into the next one. So basically, he's going to start tackling weight loss drugs and obesity. So in and of itself, he's criticized. Let me just go to this. So he's criticized specific drugs like Ozempic, liraglutide, tirzepatide.
This is back to RFK.
RFK stuff. Cool. Yeah, sorry. So this is what he plans to do. He wants to kind of like nominalize all this and make sure people aren't doing the wrong things with it. So Actually, let me go back here. Yeah, and let's just go into that. So like there has been a wild craze, and we know this with weight loss drugs, specifically type 2 diabetic oral drugs, because this is an injection, but in the sense of weight loss alone, right? And there was a massive shortage, and people that actually needed the drug to help with their type 2 diabetes could not get it, and that's a problem. We had this discussion the other day too about how, like, I mean, I had one patient come in and they'd been on Ozempic, either compounded or through the real thing, which by the way is over $1,000 a month if you don't have insurance. Who wants to pay that?
Yikes.
That's insane. If you get compounded, it might be like $400 a month. That's not no plug. You shouldn't be on Ozempic unless you absolutely need it. But the amount of weight that this patient lost over 3 months, I think was like 15 pounds, so 5 pounds a month. How many patients have come in here in like over 30 to 45 days have lost like 20 to 25 pounds?
I would say the vast majority have gone through the protocol.
Yeah. Isn't that insane? And like, did I use tirzepatide, liraglutide, Ozempic? Nothing. And the reason why is because they have barriers in their gut, such as infections, such as SIBO, SIFO, irritable bowel syndrome, inflammatory bowel syndrome, colitis, whatever it may be, that needs to be addressed. Addressed with alternative medicine, addressed with regular medicine, addressed with IV and nutraceuticals and peptides and all these different things that we offer here. And people will let their body do what it was designed to do. And because again, like if somebody is just like wants a weight loss drug, it's a hot commodity right now. You go to your provider, like, yeah, you want to try it? Let's try it. You know, let's do it. Do they say anything about nutrition and diet?
Oh my gosh.
No, man.
Fire me up.
You should. You should get to work. You should definitely like do some physical activity. But just like we talked about last time, nobody's holding their hand.
That's right.
Nobody's telling them what they need to do. Like, how many people have gym memberships that don't go to the gym because they don't know what to do?
Correct.
It's insane.
Correct. Yeah.
You know, so
even like trying to do the quote unquote right thing, like prebiotics, probiotics, if you're feeding this inflammation and or like we saw a patient, like, I don't understand. I've got these gut issues. I've been taking probiotic for years. Had, I think it was H. pylori, and just continued to feed the process. And there's just not enough digging being done, and we can't cookie cutter it because that's not how we're made. That's not, it can't all be encompassed in one little pill, right?
No.
But understanding what's going on at a deeper level, like you said, just turning off that inflammation, and especially the things feeding that, just staying away from it in general. And you take it away completely. Like it's not a okay, like maybe don't do so much sugar. It's gone. And when it's gone, just like that, if that's really what you want in terms of weight loss is a byproduct, but you're getting healthier, your gut is becoming a clean slate. It's pretty cool to watch. Absolutely.
In and of itself, we know that, you know, Ozempic increases the ability for, you know, GLP-1 to actually be activated, which creates a stasis effect in the gut, which means your motility goes down, meaning the food and those things just sit there. Now, you do have a better regulation of glucose, which is what it's used for, but it creates massive dysbiosis. And to your point, I want to talk about two things. One, H. pylori. So H. pylori is basically a specific type of bacteria that can cause ulcers in the gut, which have high perfusion, meaning blood flow, and it's an open wound, right? So there's bringing things. So we eat food all the time and have microbes all over it. And I talk about this with all my patients, where if you have an open sore like that, one, it's basically a petri dish, and then it starts to proliferate. Now you get this bad bacteria. H. pylori also loves acidic environments. But when we figure out that that's going on, then yeah, you can have proliferation of that bad bacteria, and then it turns into massive dysbiosis, or way too much bad in comparison to good. And that patient's done for. Now they're taking the probiotics, now they're taking the prebiotics. The probiotics are immature coming in, so you just poop them out. And the prebiotics you're trying to feed your probiotics with that you just ingested are just feeding the bad bacteria. And like, we're just creating this huge problem. You don't even know. You're wasting your money and you're creating a bigger problem. So, you know, another one is, how fit was that girl that came in the other day? And she's a nutritionist, I found out.
Yeah.
And
she looked like she was dialed in.
Yeah, super dialed in. Top 5 worst gut I've ever seen.
That's crazy.
Just wild. And she's just like, I don't understand. I've done super, super restrictive diets. I do all the right things. I eat all the right things. I sleep well. I train. I do all this other stuff. Top 5 worst guts I've ever seen. Massive dysbiosis, massive SIBO, SIFO, all the things, man, like bad. And those things are a testament to why we do what we do, why we dig deeper. Because just because you look like a stacked house on the outside, or just because you look like you're fit and healthy on the outside, I mean, you could easily have some serious turmoil going on the inside.
100%. And we've talked about that before. I mean, there's so much more going on. And this is kind of a branch off of that. If you've got a patient, this is a question for you. Would you say that would be the number one approach if you have a patient coming in, regardless of where they're at in terms of going from childhood to adulthood, in terms of combating acne? Would that be something that you would deep dive into?
Combating acne with the gut? Oh, absolutely. I mean, like in and of itself, the research is robust when it comes to dairy in general. Anytime you do dairy and you have cystic acne or you have boils, by far the one thing you need to take out of your diet, period. It clogs your pores. It creates high mucus changes. It always causes mucus changes because it has immunoglobulins in it. Cows,
regardless of raw or homogenized.
Yes. I mean, in and of itself is, raw dairy. Yeah. I mean, in and of itself is still going to be that way. Not to mention, like, I do think there's a lot of good things that can come from raw milk, but you still need to be careful because of the sourcing. Like if you have a cow, and like I said the other day, like I had a patient where like they were in complete liver failure because they had a massive infection because they trusted the person that was deriving the cow. And it wasn't. I mean, there was a massive GI infection. I had to fix so much. But those things are actually so far and few in between. Like the amount of pasteurization that happens nowadays, I think is, and just like I said in the video, like they literally happen probably too much. But we do need safe regulations and we do need safe harboring to allow for pasteurization to be decreased or find some other way. UV, IV, like all these different things that we can help kill off things without completely destroying the properties of healthy byproducts.
Correct.
And that was really what we were trying to get at. Like there's nothing wrong with proposing ideas because obviously what we're doing is not working. And obviously what we're doing with our food is making us sick.
Which again brings it back to RFK. Like we're okay with questions being asked.
Absolutely.
And pushback being there.
Yeah. And like, that's the thing. If you're doing something right, you're going to get pushback. You're doing it right. But in and of itself, you're always going to have haters. I mean, I don't know how many people get on our thing and they're just like, you suck, blah, blah, blah. It's just like, thank you.
Yeah.
Like I'm like, I don't really care what you think. Most of the time they're wrong and they're just bots. But, in and of itself, I'm here to do something that I believe in, that is backed up by science, that's backed up by anecdotal, that's backed up by clinical, that's backed up by RCTs and systematic reviews, all these different things. Like, I've done a lot. I've seen a lot. I've seen the most beautiful aspects of alternative medicine. I've seen the worst parts of alternative. I've seen the best parts of medicine, and I've seen the worst parts of medicine. All we're trying to do here is bring the best parts of both and just give that away as a gift to the people that should be receiving it already.
That's right. That's right. In addition to, I mean, obviously you answer to an audience of one, and in addition to everything that you just laid out in terms of all the experience in terms of RCTs and clinical trials and all those things, you also have your firsthand experience that you see here, walk through these doors. And that in and of itself is going to be rewarding, and you see it, and undoubtedly it's working.
Absolutely. Well, I feel blessed, but it's because I wouldn't say I'm like Kennedy. He's way smarter than me and better than me, but I don't like the status quo. I always want to question everything. Now that can get me in trouble sometimes because I'm always the guy that just can't be okay with being okay. But that drives me. Like I've always questioned everything. And I'm not sad about that at all. I think that we all do need to challenge things. And like I said before, I encourage my patients to challenge me. Keeps me sharp. It will keep you sharp. And if you're a provider is like, don't question me. Like I'm a doctor. Like I know your body better than you do. No, they don't. You kidding me?
Yeah.
They've talked to you for 10 minutes. Like, what do you think? You lived in your body for 25 years. You think they know your body better because they went to med school and read a book? How many freaking times has a perfectly textbook diagnosis come into the office and it's perfectly textbook? Never once. Maybe a few. But like the amount of variety that we see in general diagnosis alone, like medicine would be easy if
Correct.
it came in like the textbook.
Yeah.
It never does.
Yeah. It's not
You
plug and
know,
play.
not to mention medicine in of itself is extremely broad. So a few more things I want to kind of hit on. I know we went through. So research funding allocation, he's going to go into RFK, that is regulation of raw milk and other substances, which we talked about. We can go further into fluoride in public water, medical education reform, and then agricultural practices and subsidies. So let's talk about just for a few things, just research funding allocation. What are you seeing in research, and what are you seeing in biases, and where that funding is coming from?
In terms of which one of those?
Just general research. Let's just say big pharma or food, like how much of that stuff's been funded by them, and how can our audience like start to depict and look at like the research that they're seeing. Like in and of itself, what I'm getting at is like he's taking the time to look into research and do different research allocation, meaning he's taking funds that are being used for stupid things, and he's putting them into things that actually mean that can grow, such as like maybe we are pasteurizing raw or milk too much. Maybe we're pasteurizing juices too much. Maybe we're allocating funds in stupid ways and we're not doing the right thing. Maybe we should be looking at other alternatives to sterilize milk without sterilizing everything in milk. Yeah. You know what I mean?
I guess my biggest takeaway from all that is if my encouragement was one thing, it'd be look at the origination of the piece. Like the Got Milk campaign when we were kids, funded by Kemp's. I remember when all of us kids were given fluoride shots in school. First day, I accidentally swallowed it because I thought that's what everybody did instead of spitting out, but I digress. But those are the things that we need to be exploring, and the pushback and the questions we need to be asking. If something's funded by the CDC and there's an experiment that was conducted by the CDC, I would just be really careful with that. I'm not saying you should totally discard it, but look and make sure that it's a credible source for sure. Everybody knows that. But at the same point, look behind. There are agendas. There are agendas that exist.
For sure. Well, in and of itself, like, I don't think you have to like go searching for people now that have questioned the CDC and the FDA now. I mean, after COVID, I don't think many people have a lot of trust for our government.
That's fair.
And you know, that really is fair because there was a lot of decisions that were made that weren't in the best interest. And I don't think it would have been such a big deal if people would have been like, yeah, we messed up. That's what proper leadership is. Instead, it just snowballed into this giant thing, and it didn't have to be what it is. Like literally, if the government said, dang, we made a mistake. We, even now, like we made a big mistake with the populace in masks. In and of itself, like it's just like it was already written, like you should never do what they did in that sense for masks, because it's going to cause massive things. And no, to be honest with you, I'll tell you right now, how many more sick people do we see that are getting illnesses like mycoplasma pneumonia? Now it's affecting adults, and the viralization of which is extremely terrible. I don't know how many kids with asthmatics and stuff that have come in to get their stuff, and they're like honking and breathing. I have to send them next door. You know, like it's nothing great to see. But when RSV is affecting adults, which it usually doesn't, when mycoplasma pneumonia is knocking out adults or knocking out kids, send them to the walking pneumonia, sending them to the hospital. Like something's up. Something's up. Something happened between 2020 and now that's provoking those things. And I think we all are aware of what that is. My biggest thing is agricultural practices and subsidies. This is going to step on old Bill Gates' toes, but I am excited about that simply because of gluten, glyphosate, herbicides, pesticides, crops, our food, and how much of that is going to be reallocated, and as well as, determined if it's the right thing. So
there's a lot of experiments that have been conducted. There's a lot of alternative routes that have been taken. A lot of people are getting on board with that, but to have the masses directed and their attention to be brought towards that by RFK is definitely beneficial from the gluten perspective and glyphosate.
Absolutely. I mean, like, I don't know, like, it's very difficult now to give somebody a diagnosis of celiac. I mean, we have to use like PCR and DNA changes or testing, as well as the potential of transglutaminase antibodies, endomysial antibodies, and those things when we do it through blood work. However, the amount of sensitivity that's there is through the roof. I mean, almost all of my Hashimoto's patients, and you know this, have some type of extreme sensitivity to gluten. Now, is it actually gluten? Is it the gliadin?
Right.
Is it the glyphosate they spray all over it? We don't know. Not to mention wheat germ protein allergies and stuff like that. But in and of itself, why? Well, I can't remember the statistic. I think it was like over 87% or something like that of people had glyphosate in their body.
Wow.
Right. And this is probably a year and a half, 2 years ago now, but it's crazy to me to think about the potential environmental chemicals that we ingest on a regular basis. I mean, like you remember back in the 50s, it's just like you got lead paint, like you're in trouble. This is the same thing.
Yeah.
Like just because it's not a heavy metal or something like that, it can cause just as much damage. I had one patient who literally he was all around, and man, I did a total tox burden on him to see like what types of toxins were in his body. And he used to be he used to spray inside greenhouses. Every chemical you can think of. And when I said like, I need you to bring me in the list of chemicals and stuff that used to spray, there's well over 20.
Oh my gosh.
Well over 20. And so we went through and we started testing all these things. These things have created massive epigenetic reform of his genes, as well as his processing. And he's got the most crazy things. And we've ordered everything. I went medical first with him because he just had all these neuropathic changes, instances of like, you know, cardiac stuff, stroke symptoms, like panic attacks, complete schizophrenia based symptoms, all this stuff. We've done everything. And none of those things are there unless he's flaring. Okay. And the best part is like, he's been on every drug you can think about, psychiatric drug. He's been on all these different things. And I kid you not, man, when I started detoxing him medically, chelating him, as well as doing other things to get rid of these things in his body, I mean, it was a light switch, just a light switch of just like, and I've been accused, and I can accuse myself of this, of thinking like this person's a total basket case. Like this person's definitely bipolar, psychotic, you know, personality disorder, schizophrenic, blah, blah, blah. And it's just not the case. It's just not the case at all. Like the amount of damage that occurred based on him doing that for, I don't know, 5 years of his life created lifetime effects.
Oh, that's great. I deal with patients on the weekly that used to live near very similar scenario and is still having the repercussions. I think it's 30 to 40 years later.
Yeah.
Relatedly, if someone was to see a generic detox, we'll put underneath that label on the shelf, whether it's GNC or elsewhere, what are your thoughts on that compared to the medical detox that you speak of?
Well, it all depends. And I would say, like, one, I'm not real big on patients going and doing their own things when it comes to detoxing, because typically if you have a serious issue, you can have Herx reactions. Herxheimer reactions are basically things that can happen and typically have been associated with Lyme and tick-borne illness and stuff like that. But those things can be deadly if you're not careful. And I think a lot of people have been on a kick where like parasites are everywhere, blah, blah, blah. And it's fine. Like, I don't really mind parasite cleanses. And there are plenty of antimicrobials, botanicals and stuff that have been purported to be helpful in specific cases. Like, you know, some of our patients have come back with enterohemorrhagic E. coli. It's just like, these patients shouldn't have these things, but if I give them an antibiotic, they're going to have hemolytic uremia syndrome, and I'm going to cause an acute kidney injury. So like in and of itself, the only thing like I've looked at in the evidence is things like oregano oil, you know, things that have high antimicrobial potency, but also aren't going to cause more damage down the road. Now, I know that's off base of what we're talking about, but I would say like there's a time and a place for alternative and there's a time and a place for medicine. And I would say in his case, he definitely needed the medicine. But you also have to have good medical knowledge of understanding, like, okay, if you ever chelate, you need to protect somebody's kidneys, IV or oral. It will damage them. Now, in his case, there's no way he would have gotten better alone on nutraceuticals or antimicrobials or things like that, detoxing agents. And I'll tell you too, like, a lot of people will think they're detoxing something, or maybe they have symptoms of which, and really it's like inflammatory bowel disease. And they start taking heavy doses of binders like charcoal or something like that. And now they're puking up blood.
Right.
Or now that, and like, and this is serious things, because not only when you take binders do you bind up bad things, you bind up all the good things too.
Right. Yeah.
So if anybody out there in our audience is taking binders of any kind, bentonite clay, activated charcoal, humic, fulvic acid, these types of, or zeolite, and these types of things, if you take them long term, regardless if your practitioner is telling you to, because you have whatever it may be, will cause massive nutrient deficiencies if you're not careful. And you're going to end up, you know, passing out. You're going to end up in the hospital because, you know, somebody told you what they think is the right thing to do, but they don't have the medical knowledge to pay attention to some of those variables in your health. And I've seen it all too much. But to answer your question, there's a time and a place. So,
which is kind of our approach in everything, right? I mean, there's, like you said, in your experience, and I've seen too, medicine is made for a certain time and for a certain reason. Holistic routes, absolutely. Going too far one direction can leave you with some repercussions.
Absolutely. I mean, like, I would say like medicine has been there. And I'll tell you too, like, I mean, I know plenty of people that have, their life has been completely, medicine will save your life. It will save your life. It can also kill you. That's iatrogenic. I mean, it happens a lot. And you don't see that as much with alternative, holistic, supplemental, nutraceutical based things. Can it happen? Absolutely. I think a lot of people that come to us, they're like, wait, you're talking about doing medicine with me? Like, I thought you were just a natural provider. And I'm like, I am a natural provider.
Right.
But the 76 supplements you're taking a day is destroying your liver.
Right.
And taking one additional medicine that will do all the same things you're looking for it to do is increasingly more beneficial than what your liver is trying to punch you in the side for if you're doing it. You know what I mean?
That's right.
So, I mean, like, there's a balance between all of it. And I think that, yeah, I mean, like, really it comes down to like paying attention to not only the science, not only the mom blogs, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, a lot of moms are fed up and they're having to do what they need. You know that's crazy to me, that like some, and this is no knock on any mom. I mean, to be honest with you, y'all are entitled to do exactly what you've been doing with mom blogs and like essential oils and all these different things. You want to know why? Medical practitioners out there, because you shut them up and you make them feel stupid. That's a problem. That is a huge problem. You can't come into the room trying to help a mother who's got this thing and talk to them saying like, you're dumb for not getting a vaccine. Here's your antibiotic. Oh, you don't want that? Just get out of my office, or whatever it may be. Does it happen all the time? No. But you need to be diligent with a mother's pride and joy, and that's her child. And I'll tell you, this is why we're getting such an influx of women going out, or men going out, parents going out, looking at the research, coming up with their own ideas, and figuring out how to extrapolate data and doing their own thing. You know, it's a misfire of our profession.
That's right.
And I've been accustomed to doing those things in the past, and I refuse to continue that behavior. Because at the end of the day, like, the providers can get mad about that all they want, but they caused it.
That's right.
100% they caused it.
When patients come in, because I've sat in on a couple of those exact scenarios, when patients come in to you though, in this situation, you see the wheels turning. It's not, yes, there's a lot of big verbiage that we use, and that's not what they're thinking about. They're like, I thought you're a holistic provider. I don't trust the medical model, but this is where the two paths meet. This makes sense. Like, this is why we have this as an option. And also my long-term benefit is in your mind as you're prescribing this for a season. Get them off, and then we're rolling again.
100%. I mean, like, I tell every one of my patients, like, I try to utilize medication that is as bioidentical as possible, that is as close to what your body would normally produce as possible for a season, like you're saying. Because let's just say for thyroid in general, like, I'll tell you, like, some people are like, I don't want to do thyroid medication because I've heard that if you're on it for life, or if you're on it, it's going to cause osteopenia like Synthroid or something like that. And I'll tell them, you're correct. If somebody prescribes you something like that and forgets about you, because it happens all the time, and this is how polypharmacy happens, yes, that's a problem. I give them my word. You've heard it. Where if I am going to prescribe something, as long as your body is able to do what I anticipate that it's able to do, and you don't need it anymore, meaning your symptoms of medication, or like the side effects of the medication is going way up, meaning it's being too much for your system, that means your thyroid, or in that specific case, is working way more than it needs to, meaning I need to cut the dosage down.
Correct.
Because your body's doing what it was naturally supposed to do. And I just think it's one of those things. And I think all we're trying to do here is restore people's belief, not only in medicine, but an integrative approach.
Mm-hmm.
I think that if you pair the two, this is where medicine is going, and regardless of whatever people think, like, it's going that way. Now, is the research there? No, because the research is funded by companies that don't want that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's fine. But in and of itself, if you're going to ask the general person, the lay person, whatever, they want as much natural as possible. They think pill equals bad. And there's plenty of people that want pill equals good.
Yes.
But there's no short-term fix. And those are the people, pill equals good, that are on Ozempic trying to lose weight. And the people that are like pill equals bad is the one that like medicine has killed their family member.
Right.
Or it was done inappropriately and they don't trust it. And I understand it. I totally understand it. We're just trying to bridge the gap and make sure that they can have some restored hope that they need it, you know?
That's good.
So.
That'll preach.
Absolutely. In and of itself, let's just see if there's anything else. Any other things you want to like chat about?
You hit on the big ones. I'm excited about I don't even know how you say it, MAHA, Make America Healthy Again movement.
Yeah,
that's
sure.
exciting.
Mm-hmm.
I love the cracking down. One of my favorite quotes of all time is Ronald Reagan saying, "This should be your biggest fear. I'm from the government and I'm here to help."
Absolutely.
And I think that's where this comes into play too. Like, gone need to be the days of this is what we're doing for the masses.
Yeah.
We're just going to turn our backs and like, hopefully it works out. And instead it's going to be scrutinized. And that's a really good thing.
That's a beautiful thing. And I'm extremely excited. I'm in your corner with all those things you were saying. And I really look forward to it, you know, and I really am rooting for RFK because regardless, he's going to be in that position.
Mm-hmm.
And as a unified nation, we need to do our best to assist in that, do our best to trust him with that. And is any leader going to make mistakes? Yes. He's the type that's going to own up for those things. He's not just going to sit back and be like, oh yeah, well, you know, I'm still right, so we're going to keep doing this and keep snowballing. Like, that's just not going to happen. And that's what I love about this situation.
That's right.
But
the other thing I was going to say, you cannot equate this to like the civil rights movement. I mean,
no.
There's still things that are happening that very, very sad in our history.
Mm-hmm.
You can't shame away from that or look away from that. What I will say is it does seem like in almost a similar fashion, the silent individuals who are just raising a little bit of heck, if you will, like, hey, I'm not okay with this. Hey, I'm not okay with this. Now kind of have a face with this Make America Healthy Again thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost an applause towards moms and dads that are putting their foot down saying, you know what, I'm not okay with this and we need to make some changes.
Absolutely. I mean, it starts with one person and then it just escalates and it turns into something where I think the people voted. I think the people are frustrated and I think they're just looking for a new decision and they're clinging to something that provides them a little bit of hope. And you may not like the candidate, you may not like the candidates, but all we're looking for is general progression in the right way that promotes all of us. And there's a lot of people that are going to say, like, this doesn't promote me at all. There's a potential that some of those things are true, and there's a potential that we don't know yet.
Mm-hmm.
And in and of itself, I have always been in the camp that's just like, I've always been quick to react. And I've learned lately that if you just sit back, see how it unfolds, you're going to be in a much better state of mind and more of an open mind to what can and will happen if you allow it.
Correct.
So
that's a good word.
Well, that is podcast number 2 from Report of Findings. We hope you guys enjoyed it and stay tuned for episode 3.